Kathy Buccio, and welcome to South Florida PBS Health Channel Empower, Employ, Excel, Advancing Disability Inclusion, a community conversation. So during Employment Disability Awareness Month, the Health Channel is proud to announce its commitment to making a positive impact. In partnership with prestigious organizations, we're here to shed light on the challenges faced by millions of Americans living with mobility limitations, be it individuals, veterans, seniors with disabilities, or their dedicated family and caregivers. And today we're joined by a panel of advocates and experts of disability inclusion to engage us in this conversation. So I'd like to introduce our panel, starting with Haley Moss, attorney, author, artist, speaker, and leader on disability inclusion, autism, and neurodiversity in the workplace. Hope Gibson, real estate agent at Access Perfect Homes and public disability advocate, and Alex Norman, co-founder of Access Build. Thank you all for joining us on the Health Channel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Excited to dive right in. So Haley, thank you, Haley. I'm actually going to start with you. You have a personal story as someone who's very passionate about disability and inclusion. So can you tell or share with our viewers more about your story with autism and how it sort of shaped your journey?
Absolutely. I was diagnosed with autism back in 1997 when I was 3 years old. I was actually diagnosed and my family received services from the University of Miami Center for Autism and Related Disabilities. So this is a hometown story as well for me. I am born and bred in South Florida. I'm happy to still call this home. And when I was a kid, I was largely non-speaking. I was not doing the same things that other kids were. And that was cause enough for concern for my parents to get me identified and seen if that's something that they want to explore of, hey, what's going on? And what ends up happening is I'm diagnosed with autism and they're told all the things that I will never be able to do. So they're told about how I might not be able to hold a job or make friends or get a driver's license or graduate high school. Obviously, that's not what ended up happening. And I feel very grateful for the people who believed in me and who said yes while the world said no. And that in turn inspired me to help advocate not for, but alongside other autistic people and other people with disabilities so the world can be more inclusive and accessible and that we get the opportunities that we deserve in this life.
I love that, Haley. And do you feel that you have been able to sort of open doors or open others' eyes into what it is living with autism and how you can, as you just demonstrated and shown, that you can just live your life?
I think that's the best point that we could have made is it's just living your life is I do not know what it is like not to be an autistic person. This is the hand in life that I've been dealt and I'm doing my best to make the most of it. And I think that's the thing that I hope people take away from disability stories like we're telling today is that they're human stories. It's not something that happens to other people, that people with disabilities are in your community, they're your colleagues, they're your friends, they're your loved ones. And realizing that our stories are human stories at the end of the day is such an impactful thing. And that at the end of the day, the things that separate us or make us different really aren't as different as you might think they are.
And you've also found that independence as well. And you talk a little bit about the resources that you had that helped you find that independence. Can you share a little bit one of what those resources were for you to be able to claim that independence?
I think independence is such an interesting thing because I feel like that's something I still struggle with because I've learned over time that independence isn't just do it all yourself. It's knowing when to tap into those resources and when to lean on other people that you love, care about, and just resources and folks within your community. So some of the best things out there are our local disability communities at the county, city, and statewide level. So I am also on the board of Disability Rights Florida, and I found community there. I am also on the board now, kind of a full circle moment at Card, the very folks who had identified and helped my parents find services. And there's also so many people that you can connect with online and locally as well. I think that's so huge. I found community for the very first time as a teenager at a conference about autism in Orlando, because that's the first time I met autistic college students and was like, oh, wow, I can go to college. That's in my future. That's amazing. So I really appreciate that. And I think that resources, it's your mileage may vary because what you need in every individual is different, but it's all there and it's all where you want to start looking and feel most comfortable and what's accessible to you.
And it's interesting because it's in the word today. We talk about empower, and you felt empowered when you were able to find others who are just like you. And when it comes, but I want to talk a little bit about the workforce. Was it a little bit more challenging to disclose uh, that your autism to an employer?
Yes and no. So it was difficult to make those disclosure decisions because you never know how another person's going to react. But thankfully, the employers that I've had have all been extremely supportive, and every person that I have worked for the most part, or at least the overwhelming majority, have been personally connected to the disability community, whether it's themselves or a family member. And I've recognized that parents of children with disabilities or autistic kids have been my greatest champions because they genuinely want to see others in the community succeed, because it also helps them give back to the community and hopefully build a better future for the people they love as well.
Can you talk to us, Haley, a little bit about those policies and practices that are there to prevent that discrimination as well, or maybe harassment based on disability, because it's often one of the key factors that many of those who have a disability are faced with.
Sure. So, the biggest piece of legislation and protection that's available to people with disabilities is the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. And it's divided into five titles that largely impacts how we participate in the community. The big one for employment is Title One, that basically most employers with 15 or more employees cannot discriminate in the whole employment life cycle, from hiring practices all the way to when you eventually leave or maybe let go, that they can't treat you differently on the basis of disability, and that they're required to provide reasonable accommodations to essentially level the playing field to make sure you are able to do the best job that you can in the moment. So that is one of the biggest things that's available to us. And realizing and recognizing how to advocate with that guidance is really important. And for employers, it's important to understand that the ADA is not the ceiling, it's just the floor. So it's the bare minimum you should be doing. And a lot of accommodations and inclusion is really just human stories and good communication and getting to know one another and figure out what works best for each individual.
And through your work, Haley, do you feel that you've had to advocate some of these these laws and these policies for certain employers?
Yes, because not everyone knows what their obligations are or how to best work with this in practice. But there is a little bit of a learning curve, as with most things that are new to us. So, disability is new to a lot of folks. They're not always used to it. They don't know that they already are working with people with disabilities, even if they don't disclose. So, recognizing what's available to them and making it an empowering conversation for both employees with disabilities and their employers is something I'm extremely passionate and excited about doing.
And under that same act, Alex, I'm going to move on to you. Tell us a little bit about Access Built and the organization's commitment to promoting that diversity and inclusion as well.
Yeah, so thank you for having me as part of this important conversation. As a universal design and build agency, as Access Built, diversity and inclusion is a very fabric of what we do. And as we know, disability is not indiscriminate of age, sex, and ethnicity, race, or socioeconomic background, and represents the largest minority in America, roughly about 61 million Americans. So when we started the company, we set out on a mission to solve for the scarcity of homes designed for disability, as only 1% of America's housing stock meets the very basic of standards. But we soon realized that the issue was greater than that. We realized that the fact that equal access to basic living opportunities is a critical human right. It's about how we all work together to help remove barriers people with disabilities face, and so that more people with conditions can live more freely without friction in places of work, places of living, commerce centers, and even learning environments like schools and institutions. So we try to do our part within Access family of companies by continuing to build our teams with disabilities and encouraging our partners to do the same. But we all can do a lot more, right? I mean, we're very familiar with the narrative, encouraging people to go back to the office post-pandemic, but we often forget about the fact that a large part of the population are unable even to get into the building. and let alone the office. So with the advent of remote work and home offices, we're seeing a new path forward for people with disabilities in the workforce, which is very interesting. We started Access Built in 2019. My father was suffering from a degenerative disability and was using a wheelchair. My mother, who was the sole caregiver, were looking for suitable living conditions. And so what they quickly realized was that there were new available resources to turn to find suitable homes fit their needs. And more importantly, if and when they found the home, how would they go about adapting the environment to based on my dad's needs so that it was safe and comfortable. So Access Perfect Homes, which Hope is part of, was born as a real estate agency, and we then built Access Built as a universal design agency to solve that last mile, or what we like to call the last meter, to help assess specific needs of their clients with disabilities and build bespoke solutions for them.
Hope, before I get to you, I want to just a couple of questions for Alex. I'm shocked by that 1% that you mentioned, and it's one of those things that our home is so important. The accessibility in our own home. I mean, those are things that shouldn't be negotiated or bartered almost. Can you share a little bit about what are some of the things and those challenges? I mean, you, of course, having your personal story. I mean, something as simple as opening a cabinet or going up a step could be a hindrance.
Yeah, there are many factors to keeping in mind. Recognizing that accessibility can mean different things to different people, right? People who deal with physical, sensory, and cognitive disabilities, perhaps at different life stages. But it's also to account for those that may not have a disability, but it need to accommodate visitors who do, like loved ones and family members. So it's critical for companies and individuals to consult with professionals before implementation to understand the specific needs. But generally speaking, there are many areas to think about. It's entrance and exits. It's things like thresholds and ramps and door widths. It's flooring. It's bathrooms and kitchens, hallways and corridors, stairways, rails and lifts and elevators. Lighting is very important. Bedroom and the looking at the bedroom and bedding, living areas. Technology is becoming a very important component in how smart home solutions are integrated into the home, as well as voice activation and app-based technologies and solutions. Auditory and visual alarms, signage and texture is also something critically important. But also things like parking, landscaping, door handles and hardware, and so much more.
Wow, little details that you don't even think about. It's incredible. Hope, I'm going to bring you into this conversation. Tell us a little bit about Access Perfect Home. So you are a real estate agency that works together with Alex, correct, in order to find these homes to make life easier for people with disability, correct?
Correct. Yes. And as he mentioned, the stats, it's really interesting. We are with Keller Williams Realty. So Access Perfect Homes was built on the inspiration by Alex's mother, like he said. And basically we just specialize, we specialize those who are not having their needs met as far as accessibility. And that is not only physical accessibility, also intellectual, like you said, sensory, friendly, cognitive issues as well. So, I mean, our heart is there, and I think that's a good start where we just enjoy working with people who can't get past, the threshold. And so he comes into play. I've personally been inspired. My son, Harrison, he has Down syndrome. So he's only 7 years old, but I already see, the issues that he's going to have later on. I'm also always surrounded by different families and kids and peoples and adults with intellectual disabilities. So you just see a whole nother level of the issues that they face. He's only 7 years old, but I'm already looking at what his future living arrangements and possibilities might be, whether that's, you want him to be as independent as possible. Somebody's independence might not look the same as the others, and and as an agent working with them, it's a big deal to kind of figure out exactly what their independence looks like, right? As well as what are their limitations and whatnot. So, having a child with disability puts extra pressure on parents because they want to make sure their kids are taken care of, especially when they're not here, and they want to make sure that they have a home that's safe and it's suitable and conducive to them. So, I want to help the individual with the special needs as well as the parents just ensure their future by ensuring that their loved one or themselves is taken care of. I do. Yeah, so I do. That's just kind of where my heart is. It's where I connected with Access Perfect Homes, and it's just going really, really well. We also like to go out to the community. So we go out to the community and we do a lot of different service activities as well. I just wanted to say,
because you do have other collaborations with other organizations to sort of shed more light on
yeah.
disability resources. I think that's sort of the bottom line is finding those resources and knowing how you can use those tools to actually make a difference or make life a little better and easier.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we do. We are working with different partnerships. We're building new ones. Right now, we do work with the National Association for the Council of Independent Living, which we refer to as SILO. So they get food to people in the community who have different disabilities and are not able to get out easily. So we bring food to them. So each Wednesday of the week, a bunch of the volunteers, the different agents at Access Perfect Homes, we go out and drive around and deliver this food to these people, which they're so grateful for. And so that's really nice to see. Recently, I just had this big event, a back to school event last month, called it Raise Your Hand for Inclusion. So basically the idea was just to get the community together and kids with disabilities without, encourage and celebrate inclusion as they go back to school and kind of really shed a light on that. And like Haley was saying, just normalize our differences,
Right.
just make it normal to see someone different and ask, why do you do this? Why do you do that? Recognize it, but then normalize it. Don't make it be something that makes you want to run away. And through that, I was able to get a lot of other resources and partnerships on board. This great 211 helpline, they're giant source, including like every resource you can think of for for Palm Beach County as well as Treasure Coast. And they just list, it's a great resource to start from. They were able to help, and they include us. We also I work closely with the Gold Coast Down Syndrome organization that I've been a part of since my prenatal diagnosis, and they're fantastic. They've got a huge community, and that's personally been fantastic for me and my family. The ARC of Palm Beach County is another one that we're working with. And I'm starting to get more involved with the Best Buddies International. So they have a local chapter, and their mission is dedicated to ending the social, physical, economic isolation of the 200 million people, another stat, with intellectual and developmental disabilities. They provide opportunities for one-on-one friendships. They help people develop leadership skills. They help people with disabilities, particularly IDDs, intellectual developmental disabilities, get jobs and go into the workforce, enter the workforce, empower them by giving them the skills they need, and also inclusive living, which is where I want to kind of see where we can even be more involved in. Like I said, I guess that's where my heart is, because I keep going back to that. So basically, it's empowering them. It's the self-advocacy, and just representing and thinking outside of the box. I just think everyone deserves, a place in the world, whether that's in the school, in their education, at the workplace, and most importantly, in their home.
In their home. Absolutely. I want to piggyback on something you just said, Hope, and I'm going to ask you, Haley, a little bit about that. It's one of the things I heard was those with disability, they don't want to be treated any different, but they want to be part of the conversation. There is a need for inclusion, a want for inclusion. So Haley, do you feel like that conversation is happening? Do you feel that inclusion is happening and how things have evolved? I would say maybe in the last 10, 20 years.
I think there's still a lot of work to do, and I think you brought something up that I would dare to push back and dream a little bit bigger of just being part of that conversation isn't good enough. That conversation should be led by and for people with disabilities. There's an old saying in the disability rights community of nothing about us without us. And so often we're not even at the table for our own conversation. So instead of necessarily just finding a seat to shoehorn us in, I hope that we can either build a new table or have a table where every single person has that equal say. So I do think that we've gotten further in including people with disabilities, but not really giving us the chance to lead, whether it is these amazing initiatives about housing and employment and all sorts of different things. I have a great colleague who actually says that every single issue that you encounter socially has the potential, if not already is, a disability rights issue. And excluding people with disabilities from anything in this life really is excluding a whole huge segment of the population. Something that makes disability very unique compared to other forms of diversity is it is not static, it is dynamic, it's always evolving, and it is the only minority group that you can join at any point in your life just by being lucky enough to be alive. Just some of us get there sooner than others, and it's important that we really do keep disability in mind. And when we do think of access as something at the forefront rather than a hindsight issue, we're able to innovate and include and somehow incorporate things that benefit everybody, not just a select few.
Amen.
Very well
said.
said. Very well said, Haley. I want to actually explore that a little bit. You said that there's a lot more to be done. Can you share an example, or can you share what you would like to see shift in the conversation, shift in these initiatives firsthand?
I think the first is really listening to the disabled community is the first thing that I think a lot of people can do better with, because what other people often think I need in particular is not the same things that I think I need. So it's a very interesting dichotomy of what family members, allies, employers think is the most important thing to people with disabilities. And if you ask those same people what the most important thing is, you might get a very different answer. So I always tell people the very first and most simple thing you can do to lead is listen and be empathetic and make that space that we even have the opportunity to use our voice. A lot of people in the advocacy community talk about being a voice for people with disabilities, which is why I'm very intentional about saying that I'm advocating alongside people with disabilities, because the only voice that I can truly represent is my own, though I do my best to stand in solidarity with as many members of my community as possible. So I try to do my best to represent us when I have to, but I genuinely would like room for every single one of our voices, just not one or two or a handful, but a place that every person with a disability feels seen and heard and that their concerns are being met.
Thank you, Haley. Absolutely. You make such a great point. I see that Hope agrees with you there. And one of the other things I wanted to bring up, Alex, is we talk about caregivers. You mentioned your mom taking care of your dad, and Hope, you're taking care of your son as well, and sort of already mapping out what the future might look like. How much of that conversation, as we've been discussing, and how Haley said alongside others, how much of that conversation needs to be open to caregivers as well?
Yeah, I think engaging caregivers are important. I think, as we just mentioned, caregivers is a wide spectrum, is a universe of caregivers, right? And between family members that are direct and indirect, and then the health community that is supportive and surrounding people with disabilities and families to care for those that are in need. So I think some of the challenges that we are seeing that I think could use unique solutions are the language, the connectivity between caregivers and those that are affected and family members, so that everyone understands how to care, how to manage, and how to find the best solutions. And when industries start to shift their gears and focus on people with disabilities, it's sometimes things get lost in translation. And I think it's very, very important to have the right narrative, the right language, and the right opportunities to listen, as Haley pointed out, so that people can understand what the needs are, what the solutions are, not just for today, but for the long term. And as Haley also pointed out, all of us at some point in time in our lives will deal with some form of disability, and we all need to start preparing for that. And people who are dealing with it now need to be engaged in the conversation so that we're all taken care of.
Thank
And
you, Alex. I know you want to add something.
I will
Hope.
add
Go ahead.
To him as far as the language and whatnot. I particularly find it interesting, and Haley, you can tell me if this is true for you as well. But I know that people with disabilities, like in the Down syndrome community, a lot of people refer to people with Down syndrome as like the Down syndrome kid or the Down syndrome guy and girl. And there's a thing called people first language, right? So now I'm in it and I'm used to it, and I try to, like, the best I can, share that with other people. So it's the boy with Down syndrome, put the person first and then the disability. I have heard in the autism world that's preferred to be called autistic person, right? Is that true, Haley? Have you heard that?
It's very individual dependent. So I do refer to myself as an autistic person and use identity first language. And I do know that in other respects, the Down syndrome community is very unique in being very insistent on person first language. And I 100% agree with you when people say the autistic kid or the Down syndrome kid. That is just dehumanizing the individual. And it always comes down to honoring the individual's preferences and viewing them as a person. I hope that language doesn't serve as that reminder that, hey, this person is a person before anything else. If you know me, I'm just Haley, just like your son is just Harrison, as you were telling us.
Right. And on the same hand, I give people grace because, I was, I don't know if it's ignorant or what, but I wasn't used to it. So now when I have the opportunity to share that and give people grace because they just don't know. And, I think the more we get to do that, the more that will build itself and become more responsible.
Absolutely. And a lot of the time, I'm just grateful that people are engaging in that conversation, wanting to do better on language, wanting to understand the issues. That if you say that I have autism, I'm not at all offended. I just don't use that to describe myself. Personally, I just feel the strangest when people say I have special needs. That one is the one that kind of offends me because I don't think my needs are very special. They're just human, and sometimes I need a little bit more support. I just think it's okay to name things, and that saying you have a disability is not a bad thing. And I don't want to contribute to more stigma through the language that other people are using.
Right. Having others identify you as opposed to how you feel or how you want to be identified. I think it's such a big part of that conversation, exactly what you were talking about, Haley, which is the listening part. Because Hope, you said you did, even before you had your son, you didn't know what that language or how that worked. And I think that we're all in a position to listen, to learn, and just educate ourselves a little more.
Mm-hmm. And give people grace, because sometimes, we just don't know. And I think people get offended by a lot these days. So just give people grace and let everybody do the best they can, and then help them do the best if they're not doing their best, if they don't know better.
Okay, you're right, Hope. And this is another thing. I know that we're very fortunate, whatever the case may be. Yes, we have these months that celebrate or bring awareness to certain things. Obviously, it's Disability Awareness Month, but it's just a month. I'm someone who believes that it shouldn't just be a month's work; it should be constant work, right? But at least there is something that brings that awareness. Haley, do you feel that there are better practices or tools that something like a Disability Awareness Month could be more of a year-long promotion as opposed to just a monthly thing?
Absolutely, but I do think that month is a great time for people to connect, learn, and get involved. So I always like to look at this as a sort of three-step process of you have awareness, then you have acceptance, and then you have action. And I think a lot of people are at that awareness or pre-awareness stage of maybe everybody knows somebody with a disability, but they aren't aware of the different issues or the different things that might impact that person's life. But they realize they can accept people for who they are. They can do things to be better allies and then feel inspired to take action to make things better for all of us. So I think that these months have a place. I hope they don't have to be this way forever. But I do think it's a great jumping off point to get the conversation going. And it makes me happy, even if it's 1 or 2 months a year, that people genuinely are committed to learning more and hopefully taking that energy and curiosity, and at times outrage that things are the way they are, and pouring that into something greater than just 30 days.
So well said, Haley. Something as great as Access Built, correct? This is where we can channel that energy. So, Alex and Hope, as we wrap up, any last thoughts? I mean, especially as we are in the Disability Awareness Month, what would you like to see change? What would you like to see uh, highlighted during this month and beyond?
First, I'd like to say that this month is, as Haley pointed out, important for conversation and connectivity. I think people need to have a dialogue around this, and I hope that the awareness this show helps inspire conversations for people in the workforce and at home to talk more about issues and what can be done. I think what I'd love to be able to see are more enterprises stepping forth and doing more to provide programming for employees, provide sponsorship to events and activities, much the same that Hope is executing in different parts of Florida. I'd like to see more of that around the country so that there is more engagement in the community. I also like to see more products and content created so that both people who have disabilities and allies and those that are just learning can really understand and find new ways of being able to engage and create commerce opportunities so that money can be generated, and then so that we can see an economic impact for the work that we're doing across the community.
Thank you, Alex.
I will add, I think, obviously media is such a powerful source for a lot of different reasons. And I think that if we could just like mainstream and normalize as much as possible, I see kids all the time now, and adults in commercials, with Down syndrome and this and that. And it's just, I think that's just kind of on the brink in the beginning of just seeing it. So you're used to it and you don't think anything else about it. But just if every company could jump on board with that, and look at that inclusivity and again, that would go a great way to start normalizing this stuff and just be used to being around it and being, and accustomed to it.
I want to thank all three of you. I want to thank our panelists today, Haley Moss, Hope Gibson, and Alex Norman. Thank you so much for joining us on South Florida PBS Health Channel's Empower, Employ, and Excel. It is such an honor to have you and sharing your own stories here during Disability Awareness Month and beyond, so we can continue that conversation and get a seat on that table, as Haley said. So I want to thank you all again for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Awesome. This was great. Thank you.
Thank you.